What the heck? Can't believe it. Have you ever read something that your first reaction after reading it was, what? What the heck? I can't believe that's what I just read. That's what we're going to talk about today. So I want to share with you a case here and see what your first impression is once you learn about this case I'm going to present. So let's get the presentation started here. So, hi everyone, it's Gay on here. So, we're going to talk about ADA compliance. So, ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. Okay. So, we're going to talk about ADA compliance as it relates to remote work requests. So, for those employees that are requesting to work from home, we're gonna talk about what those employers need to do to ensure that they are ADA compliant when it comes to work from home requests, especially when it's coming from someone with an employee with a disability. So today, let's talk about, first of all, I want to do a quick history of the Americans with disabilities. So what is the quick history? So the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, this granted civil rights to people with disabilities. Their rights were then protected by law. And then Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 73 gave equal employment opportunities were granted. And in 1975, Education for All Handicapped Children Act was that granted guaranteed equal access to public education to all children with disabilities. And then in 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed, which ensured equal access and employment opportunities and to public accommodations. So it wasn't until 1990 that employers then started to build ramps so that people with disabilities can get, into the office, and other accommodations that companies or the public had to adhere to ensure that people with disability can do, public transportation, education, employment. All these areas have to have accommodations for people with disabilities. And that was not granted until 1990, which is not a long time ago. I'm talking about 30 something years ago. Okay, so I want to talk about the Billsdon versus Wells Fargo Securities LLC case that occurred this year in 2024. So Robert Billsdon, a former managing director of Wells Fargo, had a physical disability requiring immediate restroom access. So he requested to work from home remotely because of his disability. And what did Wells Fargo do with a response? They denied his request, and eventually they laid him off. And then Bills then filed a lawsuit against Wells Fargo, and he was then awarded $22.1 million due to what took place for Wells Fargo letting him go after he requested accommodations. So, what are some lessons learned from this? So, Wells Fargo, they failed to engage in an interactive process, which is required under ADA. We'll talk about that in a minute. There was no reasonable accommodations that was provided. They were ADA non-compliant. What happened to them? They had to pay financial penalties, and as a result, the reputation was damaged due to mishandling of a disability accommodation request. So this is something we're going to talk about today regarding employers out there that have employees with disabilities. So how did this impact them? Wells Fargo, they had to pay a 22.1 million dollar settlement. Their reputation was damaged, and HR policy failed. Lack of proper training for managers in ADA compliance, and failure to prioritize employee accommodation. So that was the organizational impact of Wells Fargo. Okay, so now we're at a place where Wells Fargo, after this case is done, they got the settlement that they have to pay out. Now comes the challenge is now they have other work from home requests currently in their organization. So now, based on what happened here, what are the steps they should take to ensure that this does not happen again and that they are being ADA compliant? And that's what we're going to talk about right now. So, what are the action steps? okay, to handle these work from home requests that they now have. They have to revise their policy, update it so that ADA accommodation policies does include work from home requests. They have to engage interactive process, so that is ensure HR engages with employees to explore reasonable accommodations. So what does this mean? If an employee is requesting work from home due to disability, then it's time for them to interact with that employee. And it's best to have an HR representative with them to question that employee to find out what the issue is, the disability that they have, and why is it that they require a work from home, and is this something that is a reasonable request? So that determination needs to be made, and that's the interactive process, and an HR person should be involved with the manager when going through this process. Next, number 3 is manager training. You want to train your managers on ADA guidelines when it comes to work from home accommodations, and make sure that they are legally compliant. Then they should also have a tracking system. So to track any kind of accommodation requests that they're receiving, make sure they have a system to track it and make sure they're following up on those requests. So what is one way you can measure this success? If they take these action steps and everything is going well, what are ways to measure that this is working? So how can we see this? Well, there's a reduction in complaints, legal complaints related to accommodations. They're starting to receive positive feedback from employees with disabilities, and there's an increase in employee retention, especially with those with disabilities. So, what steps should managers take? Okay, they need to assess the requests, review medical documentation, and again, you want to have the HR representative with them going through this process. Review the medical documentations for any work from home requests, and make sure that they're in line with ADA guidelines. They need to engage in dialogue. Again, they're going to go through the interactive process with that employee, and HR needs to be involved in that as well. They want to evaluate feasibility to determine if the work from home is a viable option based on the job functions and the company policies. Then they want to document that process. Very important. Keep record of all conversations, decision, steps taken during the interactive process. Everything needs to be documented. Then you want to provide reasonable accommodation. If work from home is not feasible, then they need to offer alternative accommodations or solutions. And then there's a follow-up. Reassess the accommodation regularly to ensure that that the employee's needs are being met. And here's a checklist. So as a result of this, managers are all going to be given a checklist. They can put this, place it on the wall, whatever, a checklist that they need to check to make sure that all these boxes are checked off if they're in a process or if they're dealing with a work from home request from an employee with a disability. So the one to confront a request is based on documented disability on the ADA, start the interactive process, assess whether work from home can be met. The employee's needs can be met without impacting job performance. Consult HR to ensure legal compliance and policies are being followed. Explore alternative accommodations if work from home is not feasible. Document each step of the process to maintain a legal record, and revisit and adjust accommodations as necessary over time. So this checklist every manager will have this checklist to make sure that everyone is in compliance when dealing with work from home requests from employees with disabilities. So what are the takeaways? Takeaways is you want to engage in the interactive process to avoid lawsuits. You want to update your policies to include ADA accommodations, especially for remote work requests. HR plays a critical role in guiding managers through compliance. So it's very important that HR is involved through this process. And Wells Fargo case underscores the importance of proper training, documentation, and adherence to federal regulations. So these are the takeaways from this particular scenario here. So in this overview of this presentation, this was basically to cover this particular challenge here that Wells Fargo dealt with that case. And now moving forward, what is the proper protocol to follow for these work from home requests, especially when it involves employees with disabilities, to ensure that they do not repeat that mistake again, and they're not, sent to an employee with disability files a complaint against them, and then they have to go through this process again and have a high financial penalty to pay. So that's my presentation for today. I hope with this case here that it did come to mind. You thought, wow, what the heck, how can, something like this in today's time, occur? And this was a lesson for, I think, for all employees to make sure that they are adhering to ADA compliance, that they're ADA compliant, and that they are adhering to ADA policies. That's important for today in the workforce today. Thank you for your time. This is Gayon signing off. Have a wonderful day.